everybody. Oh, that's the intro I finally wanted to go for. Finally smooth. I want to welcome you. I changed my bedroom up a little bit, and it's not what you were expecting, but I promise you that other gothy bedroom will come back next time around. But I was just feeling too cute today, and I wanted to get all smushy and get a good night's sleep with you. And so I've been noticing a lot of Sanrio stuff around lately, and I love Hello Kitty. So I thought Hello Kitty and this Moosey Little Fuzzy Bear t-shirt was just the right venue for me tonight. And we all know what color's my favorite color. The hint is somewhere in this room. So if you feel like it, please check out my community tab on my channel, Venus Kalita, and take your best guess. What is my favorite color? My original subscribers, do you remember? Well, we'll find out about that a little later. But right now, we are in a new edition of Tuck In and Show. And as soon as my subscribers who are able to chat in the chat bot area are online, I will be able to talk with you. Today, though, I found a public domain story that is an old story, but because it involves soldiers and I'm a mercenary, I think I need to get back to talking to you about these kinds of stories. And so tonight is an adult sleep story. I will do my best to lower and control my voice. I want to try to make it sound interesting. It is a bit of a long one, which I haven't done in a while, but I think I'm trying something a little bit new. I didn't create its own video, but what I did instead is I decided not to make a video that stands alone outside of my Tuck In and Chill, as I'm doing these public domain creepy and scary stories for you. I think I wanted to be part of just the Friday night special episodes themselves. So I'm going to keep it here. But what I did do is create a little slide backdrop so that if you are not closing your eyes and you need something to focus on while you listen to me speak, I've given you something to look at. And I'm keeping myself out of it. I just want your imagination to drift along with my voice. But if at any point you feel like drifting off, then I've done my job. Please don't fight it. Slip into dreamland. If you slip back out, I'll still be here and carrying you into the wee hours of the early morning. If you're still awake by the end of this little bit long episode, I will again keep my word and sprinkle you with a little bit of my own collected ghost stories from my travels all around the northern half of our beautiful flying rock we call Earth. So, if you are ready, if you haven't done it yet, please go and get yourself a drink of water, at least a sip, but it would be better for a whole cup. Let's hydrate. Let's keep those lips from chapping and keep them supple and smooth and inviting. Go get that drink of water. And while you do, I'm going to lift my glass. You can hear my ice cubes. You know it. I am lifting my glass of cool, clean water, which I am very grateful to have access to. As many places in the north where I've lived, unfortunately, don't have this, and that's the truth. And many of you subscribers around the world may know there are places where they have to walk a long distance just to have a cup of water. So if you can, please do have a drink of water and take care of you. And I'm drinking to your health and mine right now as well. That really feels good. Alright, after this very surprisingly hot day, I've got the windows open. You're going to hear the background noise, but I think for my story it's not so bad to have that. So here we go. This is a public domain story. The rights, I'm going to put all of the licensing information inside the episode notes after I've aired by tomorrow at the latest, so it will go up. But it is a story written by a man named Ambrose Bierce. He was born in 1842 and he died in 1914. And he called this an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. Get yourselves into a comfy position. Whether you're sitting or lying down, I hope you're lying back. That would be so comfy. You can either close your eyes or watch my screen as you like, whatever's most comfortable to you. And I'm actually you will hear a few bits of clicking. I'm really sorry about that. But I think it's important in order to give you something to focus on if you're keeping your eyes open. So hopefully you can hear me. And I'm going to move myself from this very unfortunate bridge. Don't worry, Msoul, I'll be back. A man stood upon a railroad bridge in northern Alabama, looking down into the swift water 20 feet below. The man's hands were behind his back, the wrist bound with a cord. A rope closely encircled his neck. It was attached to a stout cross timber above his head, and the slack fell to the level of his knees. Some loose boards laid upon the ties supporting the rail of the railway supplied a footing for him and his executioners. 2 private soldiers in the Federal Army, directed by a sergeant who, in civil life, may have been a deputy sheriff. At a short remove upon the same temporary platform was an officer in the uniform of his rank, armed. He was a captain. A sentinel at each end of the bridge stood with his rifle in the position known as support, and that is to say, vertical in front of the left shoulder, the hammer resting on the forearm thrown straight across the chest, a formal and unnatural position enforcing an erect carriage of the body. It did not appear to be the duty of these 2 men to know what was occurring at the center of the bridge. They merely blockaded the 2 ends of the foot planking that traversed it. Beyond one of the sentinels, nobody was in sight. The railroad ran straight away into a forest for 100 yards, then, curving, was lost to view. Doubtless, there was an outpost farther along. The other bank of the stream was open ground, a gentle slope topped with a stockade of vertical tree trunks, loopholed for rifles, with a single embrasure through which protruded the muzzle of a brass cannon commanding the bridge. Midway up the slope between the bridge and the fort were the spectators, a single company of infantry in line, at parade rest, the butts of their rifles on the ground, the barrels inclining slightly backward against the right shoulder, hands crossed upon the stock. A lieutenant stood at the right of the line, the point of his sword upward the ground, his left hand resting upon his right. Excepting the group of 4 at the center of the bridge, not a man moved. The company faced the bridge, staring stonily, motionless. The sentinels facing the banks of the stream might have been statues to adorn the bridge. The captain stood with folded arms, silent, observing the work of his subordinates, making no sign. Death is a dignitary who, when he comes unannounced, is to be received with formal manifestations of respect, even by those most familiar with him. In the code of military etiquette, silence and fixity are forms of deference. The man who was engaged in being hanged was apparently about 35 years of age. He was a civilian, if one might judge from his habit, which was that of a planter. His features were good, a straight nose, firm mouth, broad forehead, from which his long dark hair was combed straight back, falling behind his ears in the collar of his well-fitted frock coat. He wore a mustache and pointed beard, but no whiskers. His eyes were large and dark gray, and had a kindly expression which one would hardly have expected in one whose neck was in the hemp. Evidently, this was no vulgar assassin. The liberal military code makes provision for hanging many kinds of persons, and gentlemen are not excluded. The preparations being complete, the 2 private soldiers stepped aside, and each drew away the plank upon which he had been standing. The sergeant turned to the captain, saluted, and placed himself immediately behind that officer, who in turn moved apart one pace. These movements left the condemned man and the sergeant standing on the two ends of the same plank, which spanned 3 of the cross ties of the bridge. The end upon which the civilian stood almost, but not quite, reached a 4th. This plank had been held in place by the weight of the captain. It was now held by that of the sergeant. At a signal from the former, the latter would step aside, the plank would tilt, and the condemned man go down between 2 ties. The arrangement commended itself to his judgment as simple and effective. His face had not been covered, nor his eyes bandaged. He looked a moment at his unsteady fast footing, and let his gaze wander to the swirling water of the stream racing madly beneath his feet. A piece of dancing driftwood caught his attention, and his eyes followed it down the current. How slowly it appeared to move. What a sluggish stream. He closed his eyes in order to fix his last thought upon his wife and children. The water touched to gold by the early sun, and brooding mists under the banks of some distance down the stream, the fort, the soldiers, the piece of drift, all had distracted him, and now he became conscious of a new disturbance. Striking through the thought of his dear ones was sound which he could neither ignore nor understand, a sharp, distinct, metallic percussion like the stroke of a blacksmith's hammer upon an anvil. It had the same ringing quality. He wondered what it was, and whether immeasurably distant or nearby. It seemed both. Its recurrence was regular, but as slow as the tolling of a death knell. He awaited each new stroke with impatience and, he knew not why, apprehension? The intervals of silence grew progressively longer. The delays became maddening. With their greater infrequency, the sound increased in strength and sharpness. They hurt his ears like the thrust of a knife. He feared he would shriek. What he heard was the ticking of his watch. He unclosed his eyes and saw again the water below him. If I could free my hands, he thought, I might throw off the noose and spring into the stream. By diving I could evade the bullets and, swimming vigorously, reach the bank, take to the woods and get away home. My home, thank God, is as yet outside their lines. My wife and little ones are still beyond the invaders' farthest advance. As these thoughts, which have here to be set down in words, were flashed into the doomed man's brain rather than evolved from it, the captain nodded to the sergeant. The sergeant stepped aside. Peyton Farquhar was a well-to-do planter of an old and highly respected Alabama family. Being a slave owner, and like other slave owners, a politician, he was naturally an original successionist and ardently devoted to the Southern cause. Circumstances of an imperious nature, it is unnecessary to relate here, had prevented him from taking service with that gallant army which had fought the disastrous campaigns ending in the fall of Corinth. And he chafed under the inglorious restraint, longing for the release of his energies and larger life of the soldier, the opportunity for distinction. That opportunity, he felt, would come, as it comes to all in wartime. Meanwhile, he did what he could. No service was too humble for him to perform in the aid of the South, no adventure too perilous for him to undertake, if consistent with the character of a civilian who was at heart a soldier, and who, in good faith and without too much qualification, assented to at least a part of the frankly villainous dictum that all is fair in love and war. One evening, while Farquhar and his wife were sitting on a rustic bench near the entrance to his grounds, a gray-clad soldier rode up to the gate and asked for a drink of water. Mrs. Farquhar was only too happy to serve him with her own white hands. While she was fetching the water, her husband approached the dusty horseman and inquired eagerly for news of the front. "The Yanks are repaying the railroads," said the man, "and are getting ready for another advance. They have reached the Owl Creek Bridge, put it in order, and built a stockade on the north bank. The commandant has issued an order, which is posted everywhere, declaring that any civilian caught interfering with the railroad, its bridges, tunnels, or trains will be summarily hanged. I saw the order." "How far is it to the Owl Creek Bridge?" Farquhar asked. "About 30 miles. There's no force on the side of the creek?" "Only a picket post half a mile out on the railroad, and a single sentinel at the end of the bridge." "Suppose a civilian and student of hanging, should elude the picket post and perhaps get the better of the sentinel?" said Farquhar, smiling. "What could he accomplish?" The soldier reflected. "I was there a month ago," he replied. "I observed that the flood of last winter had lodged a great quantity of driftwood against the wooden pier at this end of the bridge. It's now dry and would burn like tinder." The lady had now brought the water, which the soldier drank. He thanked her ceremoniously, bowed to her husband, and rode away. An hour later, after nightfall, he repassed the plantation, going northward in the direction from which he had come. He was a Federal scout. As Peyton Farquhar fell silent and he went straight downward through the bridge, he lost consciousness and was one already dead. From this state he was awakened, ages later it seemed to him, by the pain of the sharp pressure upon his throat, followed by a sense of suffocation. A keen, poignant agony seemed to shoot from his neck downward through every fiber of his body and limbs. These pains appeared to flash along well-defined lines of ramification and to beat with an inconceivably rapid periodicity. They seemed like streams of pulsating fire heating him to an intolerable temperature. As to his head, he was conscious of nothing but a feeling of fullness, of congestion. These sensations were unaccompanied by thought. The intellectual part of his nature was already effaced. He had power only to feel, and feeling was torment. He was conscious of motion, encompassed in a luminous cloud, of which he was now merely the fiery heart. Without material substance, he swung through unthinkable arcs of oscillation, like a vast pendulum. Then all at once, with terrible suddenness, the light about him shot upward with the noise of a loud splash. A frightful roaring was in his ears, and all was cold and dark. The power of thought was restored. He knew that the rope had broken and he had fallen into the stream. There was no additional strangulation. The noose about his neck was already suffocating him, and he kept the water from his lungs. To die of hanging at the bottom of a river? The idea seemed to him ludicrous. He opened his eyes, and in the darkness he saw above him a gleam of light. But how distant, how inaccessible! He was still sinking, for the light became fainter and fainter, until it was a mere glimmer. Then it began to grow and brighten, and he knew that he was rising toward the surface, knew it with reluctance, for he was now very comfortable. To be hanged and drowned, he thought, that is not so bad, but I do not wish to be shot. No, I will not be shot. That's just not fair. He was not conscious of an effort, but a sharp pain in his wrist apprised him that he was trying to free his hands. He gave the struggle his attention, as an idler might observe the feat as a juggler, without interest in the outcome. What splendid effort! What magnificent, what superhuman strength! Ah, that was a fine endeavor! Bravo! The cord fell away. His arms parted and floated upward, the hands dimly seen on each side of the growing light. He watched them with a new interest. At first, one and then the other pounced upon the noose at his neck. They tore it away and thrust it fiercely aside, its undulating resembling those of a water snake. Put it back. Put it back, he thought. He shouted these words to his hands, for the undoing of the noose has been succeeded by the dirgest pang that he had yet experienced. His neck ached horribly. His brain was on fire. His heart, which had been fluttering faintly, gave a great leap, trying to force itself out of his mouth. His whole body was raked and wrenched with an insupportable anguish, but his disobedient hands gave no heed to the command. They beat the water vigorously and quick, downward strokes, forcing him to the surface. He felt his head emerge. His eyes were blinded by the sunlight. His chest expanded convulsively, and with a supreme and crowning agony his lungs engulfed a great draught of air, which instantly he expelled in a shriek. He was now in full possession of his physical senses. They were indeed eternally keen and alert. Something in that awful disturbance in his organic system has now exalted and refined them, that they made record of things never before perceived. He felt the ripples upon his face and heard their separate sounds as they struck. He looked at the forest on the bank of the stream, saw the individual trees, the leaves, and the veining of each leaf. He saw the very insects upon them, the locusts, the brilliant-bodied flies, the gray spiders stretching from webs from twig to twig. He noted the prismatic colors in all of the dewdrops upon a million blades of grass, the humming of the gnats that danced above the eddies of the stream, the beating of the dragonfly's wings, the stroke of the water spider's legs, like oars which had lifted their boat. All these made audible music. A fish slid along beneath his eyes, and he heard the rush of its body parting the water. He had come to the surface facing down the stream. In a moment the visible world seemed to wheel slowly around himself, the pivotal point, and he saw the bridge, the fort, the soldiers upon the bridge, the captain, the sergeant, the two privates, his executioners. They were in a silhouette against the blue sky. They shouted and gesticulated, pointing at him. The captain had drawn his pistol, but did not fire. The others were unarmed. Their movements were grotesque and horrible, their forms gigantic. Suddenly he heard a sharp report, and something struck the water smartly with a few inches of his head, spattering his face with spray. He heard a second report, and saw one of the sentinels with his rifle at his shoulder, a light cloud of blue smoke rising from the nozzle. The man in the water saw the eyes of the man on the bridge gazing into his own through the sights of the rifle. He observed that it was a gray eye, and remembered having read that gray eyes were keenest, and that all famous marksmen had them. Nevertheless, this one missed. A countess roll caught Farquhar and turned him half round. He was again looking at the forest at the bank opposite the fort. The sound of a clear, high voice and a monotonous singing now rang out behind him and came across the water with a distinctness that pierced the subdued all other sounds, even the beating of the ripples in his ears. Although no soldier, he had frequented camps enough to know the dread significance of that deliberate, drawling, aspirated chant. The lieutenant on shore was taking a part in the morning's work. How coldly and pitilessly, and what an even, calm intonation, presaging and enforcing tranquility in the men, that was accurately measured interval, fell those cool words. Company! Attention! Shoulder arms! Ready! Aim! Fire! Farquhar dived. He dived as deeply as he could. The water roared in his ears like the voice of Niagara, yet he heard the dull thunder of that volley, and, rising again toward the surface, he met shining bits of metal, singularly flattened, oscillating slowly downward. Some of them touched him on the face and hands, then fell away, continuing their descent. One lodged between his collar and neck. It was uncomfortably warm, and he snatched it out. As he rose to the surface, gasping for breath, He saw that he had been a long time underwater. He was perceptibly farther downstream, nearer to safety. The soldiers had almost finished reloading. The metal ramrods flashed all at once in the sunshine as they were drawn from the barrels, turned in the air, and thrust onto their sockets. The two sentinels fired again independently and ineffectually. The hunted man saw all this over his shoulder. He was now swimming vigorously with the current. His brain was as energetic as his arms and legs, and he thought with the rapidity of lightning. "The officer," he reasoned, "will not make that martinet's error a second time. It is as easy to dodge a volley as a single shot. He has probably already given the command to fire at will. May God help me. I cannot dodge them all." An appalling splash within 2 yards of him was followed by a loud, rushing sound, diminuendo, which seemed to travel back through the air to the fort and died in an explosion which stirred the very river to its deeps. A rising sheet of water curved over and fell down upon him, blinding him, strangled him. The cannon had taken a hand in the game. As he shook his head, free from the commotion of the smitten water, he heard the deflected shot humming through the air ahead, and in an instant it was cracking and smashing the branches in the forest beyond. "They will not do that again," he thought. "The next time they will use a charge of grape. I must keep my eyes upon the gun. The smoke will appraise me. The report arrives too late. It lags behind the missile. That is a good gun." Suddenly he felt himself whirled round and round, spinning like a top. The water, the banks, the forests, the now distant bridge, fort and men, all were commingled and blurred. Objects were represented by their colors only, circular, horizontal streaks of color, and that was all he saw. He'd been caught in a vortex and was being whirled on with a velocity of advance and gyration that made him giddy and sick. In a few moments he was flung upon the gravel and at the foot of the left bank of the stream, the southern bank, and behind a projecting point which concealed him from his enemies. The sudden arrest of his motion, the abrasion of one of his hands on the gravel restored him. He wept with delight. He dug his fingers into the sand, threw it over himself in handfuls, and audibly blessed it. He looked like diamonds, rubies, emeralds. He could think of nothing more beautiful, which it did not resemble. The trees upon the bank were giant garden plants. He noted a definite order in their arrangement, inhaled fragments of their blooms. A strange roseate light shone through the spaces among their trunks, and the wind made in their branches the music of aeolian harps. He had not wished to perfect his escape. He was content to remain in that enchanting spot until retaken. A whiz and a rattle of grapeshot among the branches high above his head roused him from his dream. The baffled cannoneer had fired him a random farewell. He sprang to his feet, rushed up the sloping back, and plunged into the forest. All that day he traveled, laying his course by the rounding sun. The forest seemed interminable. Nowhere did he discover a break in it, not even a woodman's road. He had not known that he lived in so wild a region. There was something uncanny in its revelation. By nightfall he was fatigued, footsore, famished. The thought of his wife and children urged him on. At last he found a road which led him in what he knew to be the right direction. It was as wide and straight as a city street, yet it seemed untraveled. No fields bothered or bordered it, no dwelling anywhere. Not so much as the barking of a dog suggested human habitation. The black bodies of the trees formed a straight wall on both sides, terminating on the horizon in a point, like a diagram in a lesson in perspective. Overhead, as he looked up through the rift in the wood, shone great golden stars, looking unfamiliar and grouped in strange constellations. He was sure they were arranged in some order which had a secret and malign significance. The wood on either side was full of singular noises, among which, once, twice, and again, he distinctly heard whispers in an unknown tongue. His neck was in pain, and lifting his hand to it, found it horribly swollen. He knew that it had a circle of black where the rope had bruised it. His eyes felt congested. He could no longer close them. His tongue was swollen with thirst. He relieved its fever by thrusting it forward from beneath and between his teeth into the cold air. How softly the turf had carpeted the untraveled avenue. He could no longer feel the roadway beneath his feet. Doubtless, despite his suffering, he'd fallen asleep while walking, for now he sees others seeing. Perhaps he's merely recovered from a delirium. He stands at the gate of his own home. All is as he left it, and all bright and beautiful in the morning sunshine. He must have traveled the entire night. As he pushes open the gate and passes up the wide white walk, he sees a flutter of female garments. His wife, looking fresh and cool and sweet, steps down from the veranda to meet him. At the bottom of the steps she stands waiting with a smile and ineffable joy, an attitude of matchless grace and dignity. Ah, how beautiful she is. He springs forward with extended arms, and as he's about to clasp her, he feels a stunning blow upon the back of his neck. A blinding white light blazes all about him with a sound like the shock of a cannon. Then all is darkness and silence. Payton Farquhar was dead. His body, with a broken neck, swung gently from side to side beneath the timbers of the Owl Creek Bridge. I'll just pop back in here. So, what do you think about that, Msouls? All that he went through? Was he really doing it? Was that his soul transitioning to the other side? Is he cursed to relive that echo? Could his wife sense that he was there? It's a very interesting story to ponder. And I guess it reminds me about that saying, curiosity kills the cat. In this case, the planter. Share your thoughts about this story in the comments section below. I'd love to hear what you think. And if you suspected the ending that we arrived at. Oh, neighbors are busy out there. Well, Msouls, I hope that you've had a chance to drift off into dreamland. It's a quiet night here, and I hope a very good night for you. For those of you who might still be awake, I do promise to speckle my nights with little ghost stories I've collected on my own. I'm not sure what kind of ghost stories or creepy stories you'd like to hear, but let me see. Do I know any that are something like this? Well, I can tell you about a time I lived on a tiny island, and when we were out there, there was no ability to have internet or even a phone line or a TV in the home, so basically I just would turn my couch to look out the back sliding doors over the porch to look at the water out there, and it was it was the Arctic the Arctic Sea. And you might see polar bears out there, or certain times of year other creatures. High tide it would come up a good 6 to 8 feet, and low tide would reveal all the boulders that are bigger than yourself, standing taller than a man. You had no idea we're out there in that water. Just a place where I would imagine unknowing boaters would definitely crash. Um, but in low tide, it was kind of neat to walk around it all. Well, so I had the house at the edge of the island, and there were no addresses, so we just knew I was the house at the edge of the island. And hunters actually would go out there at 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning, to make sure that I could get up and walk to school without being eaten by a bear. And at least nicely, they would shoot up into the air to scare away mothers with their babies they didn't needlessly kill. So I was really happy about that. And I would make coffee for them because I felt so bad that they're out there in the freezing because they want to make sure I could get to school without getting dragged off and beheaded for a morning snack. And the wives, they started showing up with their men to bring their coffee pots to them so that I wouldn't. But that's not the scary part. That was the scary part for them. I'm not like that at all. I was just appreciative. But basically the arrival of the hunters was the time of the early mornings where the knocking in my property would end, and so I'd stop being scared. I didn't sleep much there. I didn't get a good night's sleep ever, really. I would fall asleep before or just around sunset, and once I woke up, I was up until the next sunrise, really. Then I'd try to get a nap around sunrise and for an hour or two before I'd have to get over to school. Because now houses up there are built on stilts, and part of the thinking there is not so much for the water rising, but when it is winter and the snow falls deep, it creates this air bubble or an air pocket underneath your floor of your bungalow, and so it actually creates a little heat pocket to maintain the heat of the house and so that your pipes don't freeze. And remember, there's no hardware store to ship things up there. You need an airplane or you need a freighter to cross the Hudson Bay and bring it in. And so that's very, very expensive. So you just don't want things like that to happen. And sometimes, kids would get under there and they want to scare somebody, or they want food, or they're hiding from their family. And you want to make sure no one's under there. But I was convinced that maybe kids were under there trying to scare me and really knocking, and it seemed to follow wherever I would walk. And I got so creeped out too that I wouldn't go into any of the bedrooms. I had to rent either a whole house or not have a place to sleep, so I was renting the whole house. And it used to be it was owned by a family who had 4 kids, and there were 3 bedrooms, but one was used as storage and kept permanently locked. I didn't want to know. I'm not curious. I don't need to break in and find out. But the other 2, one was at the back and one was on the side closer to the front door. And sometimes I go in the one closer to the front door because it looked out on the living room, but it was basically open concept living room kitchen. Just a big square, basically. And I just avoided one corner of it, and I just kept the doors locked. And you would always hear knocking, lots of knocking. And before I had moved into this house, I actually was on the opposite side of the island. But the roommate I was given was someone who was a vegan to the point of I wasn't allowed to even keep a jug of water in the fridge. She considered it all her fridge, and that I couldn't contaminate her oven with my cooking or my food or anything. And that's the reason why I ended up renting this house. It was 65% of my wages to have that, so that I could have food in the house that I could eat, or even a jug of water and a bread pot. It was nuts, but I did it. I think that was a waste, but I like the privacy anyway. She would leave doors open and let men just walk in, and I didn't have a locking bedroom door, so it was a bad situation, and I got out of it. But before I got out of it, and I don't know if I've told you this story, with the stilts of these houses, before the snow falls, you get a lot of windstorms coming from, it seems like, every direction, basically, or it gets caught up in swirls. So things get shook and things move because of the vibrations. We'll say that's the scientific side of it. Emotionally, though, it's pretty disturbing when you feel your bed shaking like in a demonic movie and it's moving away from the wall and you are on it. And worse, okay, I had a tiny little bedroom, so I was moving towards the cupboard, which always seemed to feel like I could see the shadow of a hanging man. And I did not like it at all. So there were so many motivations for me to move to this other place. And this place was painted white, it was very bright, it had big windows that looked out. I was always looking out over the water and the sky. It was just always beautiful. And except for this knocking, and this knocking was like really aggressive. And well, the people that I worked with were very curious about coming into the house. They'd lived there all their lives, but they, and I didn't know at the time, very cultural to share ghost stories, had stories about the house I moved to. And they would ask me funny questions about how I'm sleeping and all this, and they wanted to come over, and we did like a little potluck one night. And once the knocking started, they went into every room. And what I didn't know is that the one of the women was considered descendant of a shaman, a white shaman, and she specifically wanted to know how things were going for me. And she was the first person I met on the whole island. Now I'll tell you, keeping this to myself at the time, I went up north to find a shaman. I wanted to meet one because I wanted to know if I could get some bad mojo off of me from an ex I dated who was a descendant of a medicine man from Africa. So I wanted to see if the side of the world could remove the other side of the world because he put something on me because he was mad I wouldn't marry him. And I just wanted to make sure that wasn't a thing. And I don't know, I just thought maybe half my family's from this side of the world. Maybe someone from this side of the world can help me out. But I also didn't know that it's a thing to not be proud of or tell that you're a shaman because of church. And so they don't talk about it. But this person was my first friend on the island, and they wanted to come over, and they brought their friends, and their friends became my friends, and I had a group of women friends that I saw on the weekend once in a while. And when their husbands were out hunting, basically, and they had the time. She went through every room, and I didn't know at the time what her background was. And she says, "Yep, Dina, you're not. Oh, I'm sorry, Venus, you're not imagining it. We're all hearing the knocking, and there were 3 of them there, looking in the rooms, and the other 2 wouldn't go into a room by themselves. She did. This one did. Shout out to Geraldine out there, and went into every room and listened to the knocking, tried to listen to where it was coming from, and asked me if I'd seen anything, if I think I heard anything. And I said, I didn't want you guys to think I'm crazy. They're like, no, we take you seriously. We can hear it. This is what's happening. It's very aggressive. There's nobody out there. And they went and looked like, because there were 3 of them and me, they're like, you stay right here and watch. They went, one to each door and one to the other side to where the other bedroom was, and all looked under the house to make sure there's nobody. And they said, this isn't normal knocking. This is not the wind. This is something to get your attention. We don't think you're going to get hurt, but you're not going to like it. What have you been seeing? And then it wasn't a question anymore of, have you seen anything, but what are you seeing? They knew something that I didn't, and it was disturbing. I said, okay then. In the other house, I said, I thought, the shadows would look like a hanging man, and I didn't want to see his face. I don't want him looking at me. I feel like I'm gonna die if I see a face. I don't want to see ghosts. I always ask ghosts, don't show yourself to me, please, because I don't want to die right now. Can we wait until I have died of natural causes, and then we can talk? Because that would be much better in my plan book. But they were taking me seriously, and they said, well, there is someone who hung themselves here, right where you said you saw them. And I'm like, great. Well, what did they want? They said it was actually a teenager who had done it on their birthday in the living room where I was sticking to sleep and eat and everything because I didn't want to go in the bedrooms. And he wants to say hello. He just wants to be acknowledged because this is his house. I said, does he know that he's gone? Yep. Does he know? Yep, that you're visiting, you're a pretty girl, and he wants to acknowledge that you're here. That's all. He just wants to acknowledge. So we did like a tea ceremony thing, and I asked if I could have someone, if they knew someone, because again, I didn't know what she was culturally. I asked if they knew anybody who could come and do like a cleansing. And that's the first time I actually officially asked for a cleansing. Like in my culture, there's a way to do that, and we do it with the palm leaves every year at Easter, and we burn the old palms and put them in the four corners of your house. Like, they're things that I just considered superstition, but now I'm thinking, you know what, I need to pull on some old-fashioned belief systems, because I'm not sleeping, and I don't want to see, now that I've heard the story, I don't want to see it. I want it to go, crossover, whatever. And they said they've done it before, but they wouldn't, because that's his home. And he wants to be acknowledged that that's his home. So, that's what we did. But then that's how I then found out what her background was, and she did bring someone who did practice from her family, and that's when I learned like their system of opening every drawer, every cupboard, every thing that can be open, so nothing can hide in any one little spot. And then when everything's open, even the doors and windows, everything to the outside, they make a circle and they make a big prayer. And it's a nice prayer, and it's basically telling everything bad to leave and everything good is welcome, but everything bad has to leave. So only things with good intentions can be near you. And actually, I'd never been into this kind of thing, and I always switched the channel on TV when something like this was being shown, but I participated in this, and I actually started getting sleep, and I actually wasn't hearing as much knocking anymore. It happened infrequently. So I was getting better rest and like feeling better. I wasn't feeling very well when I wasn't sleeping. And started to invite more people over to have parties and Tupperware parties and dinners, so that I didn't feel like so alone in there, because there really wasn't much to do. And also I've learned, like, wives of hunters, they are constantly creating and working hard, so they can't necessarily visit and hang out the way we might do in the city for a glass of wine or a movie or something like that. They're always having to make clothing, make winter clothing, to keep the house clean and cook the food, and there's always a pot of coffee ready in case anybody drops by out of nowhere, because there's no donut shops, there's no restaurant to hang out in, there's no movie theater, it's just the people. And so they're very welcoming and hospitable. And so, yeah, I stayed in that house, but I did actively look for roommates. And you have heard the story of my roommate and my cat, and that incident in the kitchen, which the cat acknowledged too. And I'm thinking it was maybe that entity, maybe something else, but that happened after the cleansing, so I did ask for a second cleansing. But I didn't see anything anymore, which I was very relieved about. But it also makes me wary anytime I move again. I don't want to see anything in the shadows, so I've always got a TV on or a lamp on or something, usually in the hall or something. Like, I never black everything out, and I've always got my drapes open so I can see the sun, the stars, the moon, ripples on the water, look at nature, to feel safer. And yeah, that's my story for the night. Tell me what kind of stories you want to hear about, and maybe it'll jog my memory, because I seem to be circling around that particular place where I lived. Had quite a lot of energy. And I think with the wind blowing in every direction, and sundogs and eclipses, and just the sun and the moon seem to be winking at you. The sky's winking because they seem to be in the sky at the same time together throughout the day. The moon was up quite often, and so, yeah. Just something a little different about the magnetism and the energy of the nature up there. And of course, that was my entry into learning a whole lot of ghost stories for that medium-sized town. That one isolated island had quite a lot going on. All right. Well, we're 52 minutes in, hoping that I entertained you for the evening. It is 10 to 11 Eastern Standard Time right now, and that's pretty much the end of Tuck In and Chill for the evening. I'm not seeing any of the active subscribers on tonight, so there's no one to generate a chat with. So what I'll say is, for those of my returning viewers who are in different time zones who watch my shows after I go live, thank you for popping in. Let me have some feedback in the comments whether you're liking the direction of my story choices, or if you're looking for something very different, or if you've written one of your own and you'd like me to read it for you. Just to let you know that this particular background bedroom was made by me interfacing with the Microsoft Creative AI program when it was giving out the free trial versions. So this is my blue bedroom, and so I can take credit for that, I suppose. I know there's a debate out there about all that, but at least I know I did not lift it from someone else, so I'm copyright free. And as far as the other images, I was searching public domain photos, public domain images. They were free photo images, and one of them was from Getty Pics, and some of them are unknown. Some of them were real photos by photographers, but offered up as free pictures, so in public domain. So I hope hope you all believe me, but I'll put the information in the episode description once I get back into that, probably later on in the weekend. So I will make it more clear. But yeah, I found this to be an interesting story. So much to debate. Did he really go through that with his soul? Was that all his imagination? Did he have more than one life and we're seeing different snippets of the layers of it? Or was he haunting his wife in some kind of an echo loop, not really understanding that he had passed? Yeah. So I'll leave you with those thoughts, viewers, and hope that this little story helped you to fall asleep this evening. And I'll be making new sleep aid videos 1 month from now. We'll get back into the binaural beats in July. And I know it's a month away, but more celebrations are coming up. And celebrations are happening right now in June for so many different groups. So this coming tomorrow at 10 p.m. I will be back live for a brief guild meeting, 20 to 30 minutes. I'm not going to draw it out. And if I have any new episodes to sneak peek preview with you, you know that's when I do it. And then Sunday we will be back live for Dragonflight. And I can see there's a lot of updates going on with the Blizzard Gaming, so I have to run a trial run of that. But we are off to the races because I have unlocked how to fly the dragon, and once I can finally complete that quest and land it properly, I did all the hoops just to not land it properly and leave the quest. So now I know better. Thank you, Noriyama, for letting me know about that. My guildie who's out there helping me and who gears me up from time to time. So Nori, I'll see you Sunday night, I think. And that's whose dragons are featuring in some of our thumbnails for the next couple of weeks too. Thank you, Nori, and all your many beasts. And and then I will be back on Tuesday night. I would like to give a nod. The next Riddle Me Din Din will be inspired by the United States of America. So I'm gonna thank all my American subscribers, and then I'm gonna head off to another part of the world the week after, because of course I'm traveling all the countries through Riddle Me Din Din. It's one staycation at a time every Tuesday night until I visit all of the homelands of all of my subscribers. And thank you, new subscribers. As of today, we have 101. I don't know who that one is, but thank you very much, and I hope you stick with us. So have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Stay cool. If you don't have a pool, head to the public pool, head to the beach, head to the local lake, run to the mall, run to the community center, wherever they've got air conditioning. I know movie theaters are always my place to visit on a hot summer's night, and it feels so hot. I feel like it's already summer. So I hope the farmers are doing okay out there and their animals too. I've got my little porch garden potted and I'm starting to see sprouts, so I'm feeling like spring is in the air, but it's already cooking. And all of this makes me feel so much happier, and feeling happier makes me feel more relaxed, and more relaxed helps me to feel kind of sleepy. And I hope everyone, you have sweet dreams tonight. And if these stories have flavored your dreams in any ways, let us know in the comments below. Alright, Msoul. Take care of yourself. I am raising my glass of water. Please hydrate before you drift off to sleep if you're still awake. It feels so much better. Your organs need the help. And not to nag at all. I'm not trying to nag at all. No. I just wish for you the very best. And I'm trying to, do the very best for me too. So here we go. I'm raising my glass of water to you, and I'm drinking to your health and mine. Tuck in sweet dreams, everyone. I'll see you next time. This is Venus Kalita, signing off.